Clarisse Montano thought she had found love in Dr. Adrian Vale, the charming Dubai surgeon who promised her a future beyond her wildest dreams. But behind his flawless smile hid a darkness she could never imagine. What began as a secret romance between a Filipina nurse and a married doctor turned into one of the city's most chilling crimes, ending with Clarisse's body discovered frozen inside a hospital morgue, placed there by the very man who once swore to protect her. Clarisse Montano arrived in Dubai in the winter of 2020 with nothing more than 2 suitcases, a nursing degree, and a promise to her mother that she would send money home every month. Like thousands of other Filipina nurses, she had come to the Gulf for opportunity. She believed in hard work, sacrifice, and the idea that good people eventually found good lives. The desert city dazzled her at first, its endless towers, spotless hospitals, and the glittering skyline that stretched far beyond what she could ever imagine back in Manila. She started her new job at Al Noor Medical Complex, one of Dubai's most respected hospitals. The shifts were long, the patients demanding, and the supervisors strict, but Clarisse quickly earned a reputation for being reliable and compassionate. She often volunteered for night shifts, not because she liked them, but because the overtime pay meant more money for her mother's medicines and her younger sister's college tuition. Her quiet dedication made her stand out, and it was during one of those endless nights that her path crossed with Dr. Adrian Vale. Dr. Vale was the kind of man who seemed untouchable. His reputation as one of the best surgeons in the hospital preceded him. He had charm, sophistication, and confidence that drew everyone's attention. Clarisse first met him during an emergency operation when she was assisting in the trauma ward. Her calm presence and steady hands impressed him, and from that night on, he began noticing her more often. He would pass small compliments, assign her to his team, and linger near her station longer than necessary. Clarisse tried to ignore the attention. She knew he was married, everyone did. His wife, Lydia Vale, owned several medical supply companies that supplied the hospital. They were seen as a power couple, respected but distant. Still, Adrian's gaze carried something that made Clarisse feel seen, something she hadn't felt in a long time. She told herself it was just admiration between colleagues, but deep down, she felt something shifting. Weeks turned into months, and their paths intertwined more frequently. Late nights in the hospital blurred the boundaries between professionalism and emotion. He would bring her coffee during long shifts, find excuses to discuss cases that didn't concern her department, and offer rides home after work. At first, she refused, but one night, exhausted after a 14-hour shift, she accepted. That single decision became the beginning of something she could no longer control. Clarisse found herself drawn into Adrian's world, quiet dinners in hidden cafes, long drives through the empty Dubai Marina streets, and private moments in his luxurious car where he promised her things that felt like dreams. He spoke of leaving his wife, of starting anew in another country, of giving her the life she deserved. His words filled the empty spaces in Clarisse's heart, spaces carved by loneliness and longing. She believed him because she wanted to dot by mid-2021. The affair was no longer a secret to those who paid attention. Whispers began circulating among the nurses. Clarisse noticed the looks, the half-smiles, the gossip that followed her down the halls. But she was too deep to care. Every time she thought about ending things, Adrian would draw her back in with apologies and affection. He made her feel indispensable. At home, she began sending less money to her family, saving instead for a future she believed she would share with him. She started buying clothes she couldn't afford, planning imaginary trips, and keeping a journal filled with dreams that seemed just within reach. But behind Adrian's charming words hid something darker, a temper that surfaced whenever she questioned his promises. Clarisse didn't see the warning signs. She couldn't. She had built her entire sense of hope around a man who never intended to keep her. To her, love had finally arrived. To him, she was a secret that could destroy everything. And in that fragile imbalance between love and deception, her destiny began to seal itself, quietly, like a whisper in the sterile corridors of Al Noor Medical Complex. The apartment in Al Barsha became Clarisse Montano's world, a small, sunlit space hidden among dozens of identical buildings where the rent was paid in cash. and the neighbors minded their own business. It was supposed to be a haven, a place where she and Dr. Adrian Vale could escape the judgmental eyes of the hospital and the whispers that followed them everywhere. For the first few weeks, it was. There were mornings when Adrian brought her breakfast and afternoons when they watched the city skyline fade into golden desert light. Clarisse believed she had found something real, something permanent. But the warmth of that beginning faded faster than she expected. Adrian started coming late. He claimed his surgeries ran overtime, that the hospital demanded more of him, that his wife's suspicions had forced him to be careful. Clarisse tried to be patient, convincing herself that love meant waiting. But waiting slowly turned into worrying. His texts became short, his tone cold, and his excuses more frequent. On nights when he didn't come, she sat by the balcony, staring at the empty parking space below, imagining his car pulling in any second. Inside the hospital, things grew tense. Some nurses avoided her altogether, while others exchanged knowing looks whenever she walked by. Her supervisor subtly reassigned her shifts, a quiet punishment that made her isolation complete. Only Mina Carpio, her close friend, dared to ask if everything was all right. Clarisse brushed it off with a smile, but inside, she felt her carefully built life starting to unravel. She began keeping her distance from Adrian in public, yet their secret meetings continued, now filled with unease instead of excitement. One evening, while Adrian showered after another tense argument, Clarisse noticed his briefcase lying open on the table. Papers were scattered inside, patient reports, hospital memos, and at the bottom, a small stack of photographs. Curiosity overcame her. She picked them up, expecting to see Lydia Vale, but the woman in the photos was not Lydia. She was younger, wearing a nurse's uniform from another hospital. The pictures showed Adrian with his arm around her, smiling in the same familiar way he once smiled at Clarisse. The air went cold. Her hands trembled as she realized she wasn't special, not even different. She was just another name in a pattern of women who had trusted him. When Adrian stepped out of the bathroom, she quickly placed everything back, pretending she hadn't seen. But the damage was done. That night, she couldn't sleep. Questions flooded her mind. Who was the woman? Where was she now? Why were the photos hidden? The following days, Adrian's behavior grew stranger. He became defensive and unpredictable, snapping at small things. Clarisse noticed scratches on his wrist that he brushed off as accidents. He started talking about leaving Dubai entirely, urging her to stay quiet about their relationship. It was as if he was preparing for something. Clarisse began confiding in her journal, writing down every shift in his mood, every lie that didn't make sense. The more she wrote, the more frightened she became. One night, she decided to confront him with what she knew. She planned it carefully, waiting for the right time, thinking that maybe honesty could save what was left of them. But that confrontation never happened the way she imagined. When Adrian arrived at the apartment that evening, he was already on edge. His eyes darted around as though he was being watched. Clarisse hesitated, sensing danger in the silence between them. The next morning, she didn't come to work. Her locker remained untouched, her phone went unanswered, and the keys to the apartment were found lying on the table next to a half-finished cup of coffee. No one saw her leave the building. No one saw her again. And for the first time, the apartment that had once been their secret refuge became the starting point of a mystery no one could yet explain. A love story that had turned into something far darker than anyone could have imagined. When Clarisse Montano didn't show up for her shift at Al Noor Medical Complex, her colleagues immediately knew something was wrong. She was never late, never absent without notice. Mina Carpio tried calling her multiple times, but the phone went straight to voicemail. By the second day, concern turned to fear. The head nurse informed hospital administration, and soon, questions began circulating in hushed voices through the corridors. Dr. Adrian Vale, calm as ever, told everyone that Clarisse had flown back to the Philippines because of a family emergency. He even mentioned that she had been struggling emotionally and needed time away. Most people accepted his explanation, but Mina didn't. She had known Clarisse long enough to understand that she would never leave without saying goodbye. Mina went to Clarisse's apartment in Al Barsha. The landlord said the rent had been paid in full, cash for the next 2 months by a man matching Adrian's description. Inside, the apartment was untouched, clothes neatly folded, passport still in the drawer. Her nursing ID badge lay beside the bed, and her suitcase was empty, waiting to be packed. It didn't look like someone preparing for travel. It looked like someone who planned to return. Minna reported everything to the police, and the case was officially classified as a missing person investigation. Detective Farid Al-Mansur, known for his meticulous approach, was assigned to the case. He began by examining Clarisse's background, her social circle, and her last known movements. CCTV footage from the hospital's parking lot showed Adrian's silver SUV pulling out late at night on September 14th, the same night Clarisse went missing. The timestamp read 11:40 p.m. The next morning, the same vehicle returned at 3:17 a.m. Only Adrian was visible behind the wheel. The footage was grainy, but it was enough to raise suspicion. When questioned, Adrian maintained his composure. He admitted to being friends with Clarisse, but denied any romantic involvement. He said he dropped her off near the airport after she told him she wanted to go home. He even showed a flight itinerary in her name. But when investigators checked the records, there was no passenger registered under Clarisse Montano on any flight leaving Dubai that night. The itinerary was never confirmed or paid for. It was a fabrication. The investigation widened. Police searched Clarisse's apartment again and found traces of blood under the sink drain. Though faint, forensic testing confirmed it was human and matched Clarisse's DNA. Still, without a body, the case remained circumstantial. Adrian's position as a respected surgeon made it harder for authorities to act quickly. He was confident, even smug, giving television interviews about workplace rumors and calling the entire situation a tragic misunderstanding. Meanwhile, Clarisse's mother in Manila grew desperate. She contacted the Philippine consulate, pleading for help. Filipino community organizations in Dubai began posting missing person flyers, with Clarisse's photo across hospitals, churches, and Filipino markets. Her smile, once full of hope, stared back from posters that fluttered in the desert wind. As the weeks turned into months, the trail grew cold. Adrian resumed work, as if nothing had happened. His wife, Lydia, seemed to believe his story, though their public appearances became rare. Minna couldn't sleep at night, haunted by guilt that she hadn't done more to protect her friend. She kept visiting the police station, pushing for updates, until one detective told her something that froze her blood. The Morgue at Al Noor Medical Complex had shown unusual activity logs. On the same night Clarisse disappeared, Adrian's access card had been used to enter the restricted morgue area after midnight, long after his shift had ended. When asked about it, Adrian claimed he had gone there to check on a patient's post-surgery samples, but there was no record of any case requiring that visit. It was another lie, carefully wrapped in medical jargon. By December, the missing nurse's case had nearly faded from public attention, but Detective Farid refused to let it go. He kept reviewing the same security footage, the same keycard logs, searching for something everyone else had missed. His instincts told him the truth was much closer than anyone imagined, buried somewhere within the hospital that Clarisse had once called her second home. And inside those cold white walls, the secret of what truly happened to her was waiting, hidden among the dead. It was an ordinary Thursday morning when the maintenance team at Al Noor Medical Complex received a complaint about a strange odor coming from the lower level of the hospital. The morgue, normally silent and sterile, was a place few dared to enter without reason. The technician assigned to check it, a man named Yusuf, assumed it was just another faulty freezer. It happened once or twice a year when the old backup units failed. But when he approached the older section of the morgue, the smell became unbearable, heavy and metallic. The unmistakable scent of decomposition. He unlocked the small auxiliary freezer at the far end, the one rarely used except for overflow cases. And as soon as he lifted the door, he stumbled backward in horror. Inside, beneath a thin crust of frost, was a human form wrapped in a hospital sheet. The skin was pale and bruised from the cold. A badge hung from the cloth, still attached by a plastic clip. It read, "Clarisse Montano, nurse, Al Noor Medical Complex. YUSUF froze." his mind unable to process what he was seeing. Within minutes, security sealed off the area, and detectives were called in. Detective Farid Al-Mansur arrived at the scene with a forensic team, and the first thing he noticed was the freezer's access panel. It required a keycard to open. There were no signs of forced entry. Whoever had placed her there had legitimate access. That detail alone narrowed the suspect list to a handful of senior medical staff. Forensics examined the body carefully. Clarisse's remains were partially frozen, but preserved enough to reveal the truth. There were bruises along her neck and arms, evidence of a violent struggle. Small fibers were found beneath her nails, and a faint trace of a male's cologne lingered on her uniform. The estimated time of death matched the night she had disappeared. September 14th. Detective Farid's focus immediately shifted to Dr. Adrian Vale. He was the only one whose keycard activity matched the freezer's access timestamp. Records showed that his card had been used at 12:06 a.m., long after hospital operations had ended. Yet there was no official log of any authorized use at that time. When confronted, Adrian appeared composed but visibly strained. He insisted that the system must have glitched and that he had no reason to enter the morgue. But his calm facade began to crack when the forensic report revealed traces of Clarisse's blood in the trunk of his SUV and on his surgical gloves found in his locker. The discovery of Clarisse's body sent shockwaves through the hospital community. Staff members who once admired Adrian now looked at him with silent suspicion. The media caught wind of the story, labeling it one of Dubai's most chilling hospital scandals. Patients canceled appointments, and the hospital administration tried desperately to control the fallout. But the truth was too horrific to contain. Clarisse's body told its own story, one of betrayal and fear. The position of her hands, the defensive wounds on her arms, and the ligature marks on her neck pointed to a desperate attempt to fight for her life. Forensic analysts believed she had been attacked in the hospital basement, possibly during an argument, then hidden in the freezer to delay decomposition and avoid detection. The idea that her murderer had walked the same halls for months after killing her sent a chill through everyone who worked there. Detective Farid spent nights reviewing surveillance footage again and again. One particular clip showed Adrian walking toward the lower floor with a large medical storage bag. On the night of her disappearance, he was alone. The timestamp aligned exactly with the morgue's access time. The bag was never found, but it was enough to confirm what the detective already knew. Adrian Vale had killed Clarisse Montano and concealed her where no one would look. Among the hospital's dead, the morgue, once a place of quiet respect, became a crime scene. Every staff member who entered thereafter could not escape the image of the frozen nurse, the colleague who vanished and lay hidden in plain sight. For months, people had worked above her body without ever realizing it. As Clarisse's remains were prepared for repatriation to the Philippines, the truth began to unravel fully. Adrian's reputation crumbled overnight. What had started as whispers of a forbidden affair ended with headlines screaming of murder and betrayal. Dubai police declared the case solved, but for many, the horror lingered, a story of love turned deadly, and a reminder that, even within the sterile safety of a hospital, evil could hide in the coldest, quietest corners. Dr. Adrian Vale sat in the interrogation room, his once flawless composure beginning to fracture. The room was cold, deliberately so, meant to unsettle. Detective Farid Al-Mansur watched him closely from across the table. Files spread out like silent witnesses. Clarisse's autopsy report, the morgue access logs, photos of Adrian's SUV, and the forensic evidence that tied him to her death. For days, Adrian had denied everything, insisting he had been framed by jealous colleagues or that Clarisse had taken her own life. But the evidence had no room for fantasy. His fingerprints on the morgue freezer handle, Clarisse's blood on his gloves, and the surveillance footage showing his late-night trip to the lower floors painted a picture. He could no longer rewrite. When police searched Adrian's private apartment, the one he had rented under a false name, they found more proof of his double life. Photographs of Clarisse, her hairbrush, and personal items she never brought back to her home. They also discovered a second mobile phone containing messages that revealed his manipulation. He had promised her a future, marriage, and security, only to turn cruel when she began demanding commitment. The final messages from Clarisse showed she planned to end the relationship and report him to hospital management for misconduct. That was the motive the police had been searching for. The courtroom was filled to capacity when Adrian's trial began. Journalists from across the UAE and the Philippines covered every word. Lydia Vale sat silently in the front row, her face expressionless, wearing the same black suit she had worn to every hearing. The prosecution laid out the case piece by piece, describing how Adrian lured Clarisse to the hospital basement on the night of her disappearance, attacked her during an argument, and used his access privileges to hide her body inside a morgue freezer. It was a plan born of arrogance, the belief that no one would suspect a respected surgeon of such brutality. When it was Adrian's turn to speak, he delivered a cold, calculated statement, claiming Clarisse had become unstable and had threatened his career. He painted himself as the victim, trapped in an affair he could not control. But his words lacked sincerity. The jury saw what he could not hide, the absence of remorse. Forensic experts dismantled every part of his story, proving that Clarisse's injuries were consistent with manual strangulation and that the body had been moved post-mortem. The freezer, they concluded, had been chosen intentionally to slow decomposition and erase the timeline of death. After 3 weeks of testimony, the verdict came: guilty of premeditated murder. The judge's voice echoed in the silent courtroom as Adrian Vale was sentenced to life imprisonment. Without parole, Lydia Vale left the room without a word, her empire of wealth unable to protect the man who had destroyed everything in the Philippines. Clarisse's body was received by her mother and sister at Ninoy Aquino International Airport. Hundreds of people gathered at her funeral, many of them nurses who had once shared her dream of working abroad. Her mother placed a photo of Clarisse in her uniform beside the coffin, the same picture used in her missing person flyers. It was the face of hope, of sacrifice, of a daughter who wanted only to make her family proud. Back in Dubai, the hospital held a memorial in her honor. Her colleagues stood in silence as her name was read aloud. Mina Carpio, her closest friend, placed a white rose at the hospital's entrance and vowed that no one would ever forget her story. The morgue freezer where Clarisse was found was later removed and replaced, but its memory haunted those who worked there. Detective Fard continued to visit the site long after the case closed, standing quietly where her body had been hidden. He later admitted that it was one of the few cases that had ever truly shaken him, not because of the brutality, but because of how ordinary it all seemed before it turned monstrous. A nurse in love, a surgeon with secrets, and a tragedy that unfolded in the very place meant to preserve life. Clarisse Montano's story became a warning whispered among Dubai's expatriate workers, a reminder that even in cities built on wealth and ambition, beneath the glass towers and bright lights, shadows could stretch long and cold. And in the end, it was love, blind, trusting, and pure, that led her into the freezer where her heart stopped beating, leaving behind a silence that no justice could ever truly fill.